The gold rush transformed the landscape of the United States in the 19th century, as people flocked west to seek for precious metals and work in the mines that were sprouting up across the country. Miners are shown here in California's Auburn Ravine region in the 1850s. This early photograph depicts a common sight in America during the 1860s. It depicts a Union Field hospital that has sprung up in a rural part of Michigan. The nurses from the Michigan Soldiers Relief Society have gathered around the troops. Many veterans came into New York City hoping to find jobs. However, a recession in 1866 made jobs harder to come by. This photograph from the 1860s depicts a completely different Wall Street than the one we know today. Horse-drawn carts replaced tourists and taxicabs, and skyscrapers such as 40 Wall Street have yet to rise. New York is hardly the only metropolis that appears practically unrecognizable in 19th century photographs. Today, Nashville is synonymous with blinking neon lights, raucous honky-tonks, and towering skyscrapers such as the Batman Building, technically the AT&T Building. However, this 1860s picture from the capital depicts low-rise dwellings surrounded by forests and wilderness. From growing metropolises to the wilds of the frontier state, this shot from 1868 depicts a group of indigenous people sitting on Alaska's rock cod. In the background, you can see Fort Wrangell and Wrangell Island. The Ayak, Haida, Tsimshian, and Tlingit tribes have lived in this part of southeast Alaska for centuries. America's towns changed and swelled during the 19th century, yet there's something reassuring about Mother Nature's consistency when left to her own ways. This stunning photograph from 1869 depicts Yellowstone's mammoth hot springs before the park's establishment, with their travertine terraces looking quite similar to those seen today. Montana, sometimes known as Big Sky Country, is as close to the ancient Wild West as you can get while traveling through the United States. Helena was named the state capital of Montana Territory in 1875, after growing up during the gold rush of the 1860s. It is depicted here as a 19th century boomtown, complete with horse-drawn carts and saloons. This photograph also predates the establishment of America's first national park. It depicts the crew from the Hayden Geological Survey of 1871 that investigated and documented the territory that would eventually become Yellowstone. Their pack train is parked alongside Mirror Lake, a gleaming natural beauty that lives up to the name. Yellowstone National Park is becoming a popular recreational destination, with visitors traveling from all over to walk, ride, and boat on Yellowstone Lake. However, in the park's early days, visitors were only beginning to realize Yellowstone's potential for adventure. The Annie, shown in 1871, is said to be one of the earliest boats to launch on Yellowstone Lake. Here's another shot that captures Mother Nature's timeless beauty. Shoshone Falls, a cascade on Idaho's Snake River, is known as the Niagara of the West. This photograph was taken in 1874, and if taken today from the same vantage point, the thunderous waterfall would most likely look very similar. From America's revered natural wonders to one of its most iconic landmarks, the Capitol building has undergone numerous changes since its cornerstone was placed in 1793. However, in this 1870s photograph, it is readily recognized. The photograph was shot following the construction of the Capitol's iconic cast-iron dome in the 1850s and 1860s. A group of men stands before the monument. Sticking with the 1870s, this South Carolina photograph stands in stark contrast to the image of a destroyed Charleston taken just a decade ago. St. Helena Island residents gather under the Spanish moss to commemorate American Independence Day in 1877. Take note of the exquisite dress and the table of food being prepared to the right, which is most likely brimming with Southern treats. Fast ahead to the 1880s and more of America's breathtaking natural wonders. The Wawona tree, a towering sequoia, was photographed after a tunnel was constructed through its base in 1881. Unfortunately, the weakened tree collapsed after a harsh winter in the 1960s. America's railroads were developed at a quick pace throughout the 19th century, and they were especially important in areas like the Pacific Northwest, which had a strong timber sector. A group of construction workers work on a railroad that spans the Green River on Washington's west slope of the Cascades. Can you tell me which monument these gigantic components belong to? This 1885 photograph reveals the Statue of Liberty's gigantic toes and torch as she prepares to be completed on her pedestal on Bedloe's Island. She would finally be finished in April 1886. The Klondike Gold Rush drew prospectors to Alaska and Canada's Yukon in the 1890s, forever changing the state. However, gold was mined here prior to the famed gold rush, and the Treadwell gold mine began operations on Douglas Island in 1881. The active mine, shown above in 1889, was a hive of activity at the end of the 19th century, moving around $70 million in gold during its operation. By the 1890s, photography had been around for almost a half-century. Nonetheless, the whole event remained a novelty. Here, the lens is turned on its own. The image depicts one of America's first photographers, Frances Benjamin Johnston, as youngsters gather around her to look at her camera. Johnston was famed for her reportage, which covered everything from social issues to architecture. Boston Harbor is significant in American history, particularly as the site of the Boston Tea Party, in which Americans threw chests of tea into the water in protest of British taxes. It is now a popular tourist destination, with the sparkling Institute of Contemporary Art and the glitzy restaurants of the Seaport District lining its banks. This nostalgic photograph depicts a guy rowing on calm seas in the late 1800s. The majestic neoclassical Cliff House remains a remarkable appearance on the San Francisco coast, and it was once a sophisticated resort. The majestic edifice, which still stands today, has been damaged by fire countless times over its long history. This snapshot depicts the original, built in 1863. Today, the French Market is a popular tourist destination in the Big Easy, attracting crowds eager to sample café au lait and beignets at Café du Monde. However, the market dates back to 1791, and it is shown here in 1890. We can't help to notice the craggy cobblestone streets. The Field Columbian Museum was founded to house artifacts from the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition, the first to be held in Chicago. The festival is in full swing. Impressive neoclassical-style structures were created for the fair, earning the exposition site the nickname the White City due to its vast white architecture. Throughout the 1890s, America's cities changed dramatically. The Big Easy is famous for its street vehicles, which date back to the 1830s. Electric-powered versions made their debut in this decade. They are photographed here in 1895, among typical horse-drawn vehicles. There were similar scenes out west in San Francisco. This photograph depicts a horse-drawn California mail cart in 1895, which is much different from the gigantic white vans that now ply the city's streets. The cobblestone street and ancient signs exude nostalgia. Henry Flagler is the most well-known American industrialist, and he is particularly remembered for developing the Florida East Coast Railway. The railroad is shown here in 1896, after it had been extended into Miami. The commencement of train service transformed Miami from a sleepy village to a thriving city, and it was incorporated the same year. Clark Atlanta University, then known as Atlanta University, was founded in 1865 as the first historically black college, or university, HBCU, in the southern United States. This photograph was taken there in 1899. 4 women pose on the steps outside the institution. The Grand Canyon formed over millions of years, and it appears to have barely changed since this early 1900 photograph. 2 Victorian-era women dressed in their finest gaze out at the vast horizon.